We're here with Shara Miller from LucasArts, the producer of Mercenaries. And Shara, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the game.
Yes, well, in Mercenaries, you play a mercenary. You're dropped into the middle of the demilitarized zone of North Korea. There's been a coup. A rogue general has taken over the country, and you're there to find him and dismantle his organization. He's the ace of spades, and you have to get every one of those deck of 52 that stand in your way between you and him. Your job is to make money, gain intel, and make friends with factions. And blow stuff up, of course.
Actually, on the blow stuff up front, the game's tagline is Playground of Destruction. What does that entail? Can you pretty much just blow up everything you want?
Yes, in a word. You can blow up anything you want. You can blow it up, you can move it, you can use your helicopter to winch it, you can run over it in a car, you can shoot it, you can plant C4 on it. I mean, the thing about Pandemic is they understand the joy of explosives, they understand the joy of demolition, and they've really created a game where they make use of havoc physics in an amazing way. They make use of particle effects, the smoke, the fire, and just the sheer blow-up ability of everything in the game is amazing. You can walk through a town, you can walk in on one end of the town, call in airstrikes, plant C4, level the entire town, and walk out, push your hair behind your ears, and be done.
There's three different characters in the game. There's a Swede, an American, and what was the other one?
The Brit.
The Brit. Can you tell us the differences between the three?
Yeah. So we'll start with the American, Chris Jacobs. He's got tons of hit points. He used to be in Delta Force. He's been at XOps, Executive Operations, the company that you work for a few years. He has realized over time that sometimes being in a team can be a liability. So he goes in one-to-one. If you're the type of person who likes to just go in, get into firefights, get in there hand-to-hand, maybe even go up against a tank, this guy's going to have the hit points and the strength for you. There's also the Brit, Jennifer Mui. She's ex-MI6. She's more close to the vest kind of a person. You're not going to get really too much of a sense of her inner motivations. She's the stealthy one. She can get right up close to enemies. They won't even recognize that she's there. So if you're the type of person who wants to avoid overt confrontation and maybe sit on the sidelines and call in airstrikes from above, or get up real close to people and maybe take them down instead of shooting them, she's the character for you. And we have Matias Milson, who is the Swede. And I love Matias because he is the combination of 4 different Swedish guys who work at Pandemic Studios. There's one guy who has the tats, one guy who has the hair, and 2 guys on the Mercenaries team itself. One's named Matias and the other one's name is Jimmy Nilsson. So we've got 4 guys wrapped up into one crazy Swede. He is just, you never know what he's going to say and what he's going to do. He is very fast, the fastest of the mercenaries, even in crouch mode. Each of the mercenaries speaks one language that corresponds to one of the factions in the game. The Swede speaks Russian. So when you're in talking to the Russian mafia, you can get a little bit of extra secret information that playing as one of the other 2 characters won't give you. Same goes for Chris Jacobs. He speaks Korean. So when you're talking to the South Koreans, you may sneak into their headquarters a little bit early and get a little taste of what's going on behind the scenes. And Jennifer Mui speaks Chinese. She actually is Chinese, British naturalized Chinese. And so when you go in and speak to Colonel Peng, who is the leader of the Chinese faction, once again, you get a little bit of a sense of what his hidden agenda is.
Awesome. You mentioned the different factions in the game. How do they interact with each other and interact with the character?
Wow, the factions are all there for the same reason. They all want control of the area. So you have the allied nations. Now, yes, they kind of want control, but they just want to restore peace in the area. They're there. It's a very hot political situation with this rogue dictator, a threat of nuclear weapons, and they are there to neutralize the situation. You have the South Koreans. They just want their country back. They want unification, but you find out kind of along the way that there's this CIA guy who is in control of the South Koreans who maybe also has some agenda of his own. Now, the South Koreans, of course, are at odds with the Chinese. The South Koreans want North Korea back so they can have reunification. The Chinese want to expand their borders and they want to incorporate North Korea into their government. So you always have this natural tension between South Korea and North Korea and China. And when you side with one of them, the other one is going to get hostile to you pretty quickly. Meanwhile, you have the Russian mafia over here. Well, they don't really care who wins in the end. They just want to make as much money as possible. So they're there to kind of take advantage of the chaos for everyone. They have access to guys from all of the factions. They can get the weapons from the South Koreans. They can get the airstrikes from the Allied nations. They can get the tanks from the Chinese because they have these underground contacts. So they're there to make money. You can buy them at any price, and they don't really care about the political situation.
You mentioned the weaponry and the vehicles and airstrikes, things like that. How varied is all of that? Are there just tons of things to choose from?
Well, it's funny because, these guys at Pandemic, they start out with a pretty good goal. Okay, we'll have, 30 vehicles. By the time we finished, we had over 60 vehicles in the game because they just kept thinking of other cool things that they really thought would be great for the game. And it really pays off. You have everything from your various helicopters. You've got cargo helicopters, attack helicopters, small maneuverable ones. You've got big heavy ones that are slower and maybe easier targets, possibly more armored so they don't go down as easy. You have all kinds of tanks. You've got civilian vehicles. Some of them have emplaced weapons on the back. So you may have, a nice SUV from the Russian mafia that's outfitted with this awesome, rocket launcher on the back of it. You've got, and the beauty though of a civilian vehicle, maybe not a mafia vehicle, but something like the H3, which we also have in the game, is you can drive around this beautiful car. And none of the factions will bother you because when you're in this car, you have vehicle disguise and they think you're a civilian. So each car has its own particular strength. The tanks have their strengths, the Humvees have their strengths. Some vehicles you can carry, 4 or 5 passengers. Some it's just you in the vehicle, maybe one other passenger seat. So they all have their strength. As far as weapons go, gosh, we could just spend all day talking about the airstrikes. We've got an airstrike for all occasions. You start out the game, you get your kind of slightly less powered airstrikes. Maybe you get an artillery strike or a surgical strike, something that is able to affect a smaller area or maybe in a less precise way. As you progress throughout the game, you get the more heavy stuff, the bunker busters, the fuel air bombs, the carpet bombs. There are 3 different ways to designate airstrikes. You can throw a smoke grenade, you can call a laser designation, or you can do, GPS designation. I almost forgot. There's 3. In addition to the airstrikes, tons of awesome weapons. You have 2 extremely satisfying sniper rifles. You always have 2 weapons. There's RPGs. You've got your carbines. You've got your small submachine gun type weapons. And of course there are emplaced guns throughout the game. We've got mini guns, we've got 50 cals, we've got recoilless rifles. And the first thing that you do when you play the game is I command you to go find yourself a recoilless rifle and just spend half an hour, 45 minutes just using and loving that recoilless rifle. It's really a thing of beauty.
Everything about the game looks really, really nice, from the animation to the particle effects and just the general settings. How closely did the art and design departments work together with the programmers to make sure everything just looked perfect?
I think you said it right there. How closely did they work? They are an amazing team. These guys at Pandemic, they are a well-oiled machine. All of them care immensely about quality, immersion, beauty, and you can tell when you play the game that these guys just don't leave any stone unturned. They wanted to create environments that were not only beautiful, but that also conveyed a sense of the mood of an area. So for example, if you go into an area where there's a firefight and maybe buildings have already been destroyed, you'll be able to see it in the backgrounds. You'll be able to see, the differences in the sky and the particle effects. If you go into a really beautiful hillside area, there's going to be a lovely lens flare on the screen, and they really work together to not only give important information to the player, but also just to add to that amazing excitement and immersion and storytelling.
Sounds great. When can we expect to see Mercenaries in stores?
January 11th on PS2 and Xbox.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks again to Shara Miller from LucasArts. And go out and check the game on January 11th.